going to talk to you about this book called Don't Bet on the Prince. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation because I'm just so used to doing it this way. So, well, anyway, there's nothing important to read. I'll be talking all the time. Well, the first place I want to talk to you about the author. The author is called Jack Sipes. He's an American professor at the University of Minnesota. Jack Sipes was born in 1937 in New York, and he's a retired German professor. He also has a PhD in comparative literature at Columbia University.
Literature.
Literature.
Okay.
He is specialized in fairy tales, and the most of his work is about the importance of fairy tales in society in general. And according to Sipes, I'm going to read his words. Fairy tales, this is not working. Yes, no it isn't. According to Sipes, fairy tales are a means to conquer the terrors of mankind through metaphor. He has translated the complete 1857 edition of the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, and a few years ago, in 2014, he finished translating the first edition of the 1812 and the 1815 Brothers Grimm complete fairy tales. He has received recognition for his contribution to literature, and he has a book that has been translated to Spanish, which is called El Irresistible Cuento de Hadas. I think it's the only book that is translated to Spanish nowadays, today.
Okay.
All right, an introduction, I must say that, well, of course, the name of the book is Don't Bet on the Prince, Contemporary Feminist Fairy Tales in North America and England, and it was first published in 1986, only in the USA, in the United Kingdom, by the Publishing House Gower. It has 6 chapters, but it's divided in 2 principal parts. The first part are chapters 1, 2, and 3, and it's like an essay. The introduction is like an essay. It's quite large, it's around 40 pages, and he discusses there the importance of fairy tales in society, as I said, and why he thinks fairy tales are so important for children, and why, on his opinion, it is necessary a review on traditional fairy tales. Then the second part of the book are the fairy tales, the new fairy tales, and also a reinterpretation of the classic fairy tales. And we have a new version of Little Red Riding Hood, for instance. According to Sipes, the primary intended audience of the book are especially children and women, but also public in general and educators. All right, I'm going to talk about especially the first part of the book, where he explains why he wrote this book. I'm not going to talk about the fairy tales, because if you read it, then you can have your own opinion about them. Okay, so in first place, about the role that fairy tales have in children and in our lives. As I said, Jack Sipes is specialized on fairy tales, and he defends that fairy tales are very important in society in general and in humankind and in mankind. So he says that it has been demonstrated by psychologists and educators that stories on fairy tales do influence the manner in which children conceive their world and their place inside the world, even before they begin to read. So, according to Sipes, fairy tales are very important in children's development. This way, characters become a part of a child's real world and form part of their cultural heritage. That's why fairy tales are so important for children. He also discusses in the book about about the pros and cons of reading fairy tales to children, because fairy tales contain a lot of violence and cruelty. In fact, I can tell you that a few years ago, when my elder son was around 3 or 4 years, we saw Snow White, the original one, the Disney one, and we were quite surprised because we really didn't remember about the tale. And there's a part when the witch runs away and the dwarfs ran after
The dwarves.
her.
The dwarves.
The dwarves, sorry, ran after her and they killed her. And we are so used to very white,
A black and white kind of.
yeah, but everything is very sanitized. So when you see people killing people in a story for children, it's quite surprising. But it has always been like that. And he explains that traditional fairy tales are very cruel. So he discusses about if children should be exposed or not to this kind of cruelty. At the end, he decided that it is necessary because it's part of life.
Well, death is part of life, but
This is
killing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes. Then after this talking about if it's why fairy tales are important for society in general and children
In particular.
in particular, yes, thank you. Then he talks about why is it necessary a feminist review, and he says something that I think is very important, and I like it very much because he says that it's impossible to have a view about the whole world if you don't if you don't use the criteria of underprivileged groups. If this is the world and you look the world from your side, you will never have a whole view of the whole life. You need to have the other views. And especially if those views are from underprivileged groups, like poor people from poor countries, other colors of skin. And he says that women are an underprivileged group. So it is necessary to review the fairy tales under this point of view.
Under this light is good.
Under this light, yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
you can say that.
So he says that it is not possible to have a critical point of view about the world if you are not a feminist. And he says that he talks about male myopia because if you are if you're white, if you're a man, if you're middle class, then you have a view of the world that it doesn't include the rest of the people, and he calls it male myopia. But he says that this vision can be corrected by adjusting lenses, for instance, with a feminist point of view. Why he considers women an underprivileged group? Well, he says that we know that there's a lack of good and expensive daycare centers, meager salaries of women compared to men's wages. It is still dangerous to just walk outside the street alone sometimes for women. Male protocol in social, political, and business affairs. Now it's very now in the news. The emphasis that sport uses as a national pastime to celebrate male power and using women only like fringe adornments. You may have listened to what has happened this weekend in Jerez, that the municipal, no, how do you say this?
The local police?
The local, no, not the police, el ayuntamiento.
The town hall.
The town hall, thank you. The town hall suggested not to use women with little skirts to give the
Prices to pilots.
To the pilots, exactly. I really didn't know. I don't know if they finally...
I mean, the criticism was that they would be not getting jobs, but they can give flowers if they have to, wearing jeans.
Wearing jeans, yeah, or men. Or also men, not only women.
And also men, of course, yeah.
So he also says that still liberation, women liberation has brought even more subtle forms of oppression that there weren't before. So why a feminist point of view is still necessary today? Well, he says that children are conditioned to assume and accept arbitrary sex roles. So these socially conditioned roles prepare females to become passive, self-denying, obedient, and self-sacrificial. And on the other hand, males to become competitive, authoritarian, and power-hungry. He finally says in the last chapter that romantic tales are cultural precepts for young women, especially for adolescents, has an enchanted interlude between childhood and maturity. He says there are a lot of adjectives that are only used for women, like nurturing, caring, responsible in personal situations, and some adjectives that are only used for men that are rational, abstract, principled. He says this is an reinforcement of the capitalist socio-economic system, because men are to compete against each other, and women are to stay at home taking care of children. So this is the way that everything stays the same. So fairy tales used to have this this mission.
Usually have.
He says that in fact traditional fairy tales are passive, helpless, I like this word, helpless, and submissive. And they were a prize for a daring prince. But he says that in some traditional fairy tales, folk fairy tales, there were strong women too. In fact, he says that Cinderella, the original Cinderella, she was a strong woman. And not, he uses the word catatonic. He says that Cinderella in the Disney version is a catatonic person. So he says that it is possible to recover some of folk fairy tales that in the beginning they were different, to rewrite traditional fairy tales like some of the fairy tales included in the book, or write completely new fairy tales like some fairy tales that are also in the book. He uses a word, the expression that I think is very interesting. He talks about the Cinderella Complex, about how fairy tales reflect the way women are oppressed, and even more important, the way they allow themselves to be oppressed. Women in fairy tales are always waiting for something external on their lives to transform their lives. They don't drive their own lives in fairy tales, in traditional fairy tales. So this is bad for women autonomy. All right, just to end with this part, he says that the aim ultimately, I mean,
the ultimate
aim of the book and that we should have in society is that we should develop resourceful women who work with men to form humane societies, equal. And at last, to discard the adjective feminist, just to end a day which this adjective will not be necessary.
And the work, yeah, it would be liberation.
Well, that's the book about, what the book is about. I'm not going to talk about the fairy tales because, well, I think they should be read. But I'm going to talk about the language.
Excellent.
I must say, I brought the vocabulary. I'm going to talk about the last part too. There were many words that I didn't know. I realized reading this book how I must improve my vocabulary. In fact, it was very difficult for me to read because I began to read, I didn't know a word, I had to look it in the dictionary, read it again to make sense. And again, and again, and again. And after 2 or 3 pages, I realized that it had gone around 2 hours and I really didn't advance in the book. So I just began to write down the new words for me, and I began to write them here. There are lots of pages. I printed them for you.
You did?
Yes, I have them there.
And if you want to send it for publication,
okay, perfect. Anyway, I brought a lot of copies. So
oh my God,
until I
thanks.
stopped writing them down because there were too many words. So, well, I've noticed in all this month that my vocabulary is very poor, but I know your vocabulary is not, so many of these words you may know, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot of new words. And a new verb, which I didn't know, lay, laid, laid, which means poner, lie, lay, lain, echarse, different from lie, de mentir. I mean, I didn't know the difference between them. I thought it was the same verb. But because I was reading on the book, she lay in bed. This is not in past. I mean, she lay in the bed. I was expecting to read she laid in the bed because there are two different words and I didn't know it. So, personal opinion, just to finish. As I was saying to you, it was very difficult for me to read because, I mean, the last time I read a book in English was ages ago. And I realized that I have to practice. I have to practice. It was very difficult, took me a lot of time. I had to read the same pages again and again, and it was very difficult for me. Anyway, the book is quite slow and repetitive. Not the fairy tales. The fairy tales are different. But the part that is like an essay, the last part of the book and the beginning of the book are very similar, and they say very similar things. Then the fairy tales have different levels of difficulty. I mean, for instance, the first fairy tale for me was very difficult, but the second one was very easy to read because the level of difficulty was not the same from one fairy tale to another. About the plot, well, the book was written in 1986, and I think things have changed since then. I mean, we've improved a bit. And another thing is that the book was only published in the United States and the United Kingdom, and you can realize that. I mean, sometimes you don't recognize yourself in what you're reading because it's a different society. There's one thing that I didn't like, that he likes Freud, Sigmund Freud. And you can notice that in some parts. You know, American people are very into Freud, and I really don't like Freud, so this is something that I really didn't like too much. I strongly recommend the book, especially if you're an educator and if you have children. In fact, after reading it, I've been looking for some fairy tales in Spanish to read to my kids, and also because every 2 Thursdays we gather some mothers in a public library in La Cala, and we read some fairy tales to little kids. And I mean, we're always reading the same kind of fairy tales, and I wanted to read something different, but I really haven't find anything that I liked very much. So I'm even thinking about translating the first one that I liked it very much, to do it quite simple and to read it to my kids and to their friends. I really recommend it for educators and parents in general. And that's it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, any questions you would like to ask her?
That she did it perfectly.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Yes, you did amazing work. Yep, yep. Okay.
There is a quote in the first fairy tale that I think it's a good summary about the whole book. That says that, the princess, she had refused to walk. She had refused to talk. And then her dog asked her, why did you do that? And she said, I just made myself someone he could love. And I think it's a very strong phrase, but I've heard that many times. I heard that many times when I was young. When I was a teenager, I heard about that. I heard that many times. I mean, I'm going to change my hair, I'm going to change the way I am just to be loved for, and I think it's very strong. I think it's very important for young women, for teenagers especially.
Mm-hmm.
Now when you're old, you have it more, your ideas are quite set, but when you're young, it's different. That's it.